order. My name is Phil Curran. I'm chairman of this committee. This is a budget committee to review the request of the mayor's budget on the health department, the housing, public safety, and social services. I'm the chairman. Councilman Paul Rotello, Councilman Jack Knapp, Councilman Andrew Wetmore, Councilman Phil Cola. Ex officio members of the council here is Fred Visconti, Joe Cabo, Mary Teichel, anybody else missed? Warren Levy and Colleen Stanley. And also present is Sean Stillman from the unit, Chief Baker from the police department, Chief Harold from the fire department, Scott Leroy from the health department, Paul Esteban from civil preparedness. I'm getting a brain.
Pat Waldron.
Pat Waldron, I'm sorry, Pat. Pat Waldron from the veterans. Anybody else? And David St. Hilaire from finance. Okay, I'm going to begin with the police department. I'm going to take it in order of the way I received it from Gene. David, you want to take it, or?
Sure. I'll talk about it.
Chief, why don't you come up and sit here? That would be brilliant.
I'll just talk in general about public safety real brief. And then I'll hand it, I'll speak briefly about the police department, and then I'll hand it over to the chief. Public safety overall saw an increase, basically about $410,000. Right, they're overall for public safety, which includes several departments, police and fire, building inspector, civil preparedness, Department of Consumer Protection, and the unit went from the current year budget of about just under 28,000 to 28 million, I'm sorry. And you know, most of what drove that increase is related to contractual salary increases and, again, some fuel increases. There's not a whole lot of changes overall in public safety outside of those items. Nothing really stands out. Some minor adjustments from one item to another, but overall nothing that significant. In the PD, I'll hand it over to Chief Baker in a moment here. The PD went up from their current budget of about 15 million to about 15.4. And Chief, you want to talk about the different changes in here that you made, but the bulk of it is going to be half of that is in contractual salary increases, and the other piece is a lot of it has to do with fuel.
That's correct. There's a 2.25% wage increase scheduled to go into effect July 1st by our contract. That's the bulk of the increase. There's about a $40,000 bump to our fuel oil or gasoline for next year. Otherwise, it's pretty much a flat budget.
Excuse me, David, do you have natural gas tube in your furnace? Can you switch over?
Yes, we do.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the fuel, I'm sorry, I should specifically talk about the fuel. It's really gas for the vehicles.
Motor vehicle fuel.
Not
Okay.
the.
Oh, which pays that, right?
Okay.
At headquarters.
For motor fuel, they don't, the motor fuel is paid by you, so.
Excuse me, David, didn't you say in the last meeting that we had, though, that Public Works covered all the fuels?
They cover it for pretty much everyone else, but not, these guys pay separately for their own
What
motor
about
fuel.
fire?
Fire pays for separately too. These are the two big departments. They pay for all the other
Oh,
general
okay,
government.
okay.
The only other thing that's of concern to us is that starting 1st of July, police academy is going to start charging for us to send people there both for basic training and for any continuing education courses. Unfunded state mandate that's being passed on to us. We figure the impact will be $25,000 to $30,000 per budget. It's not reflected here, so we'll probably end up having to do some juggling throughout the year to make it work. But that's really the only thing that's looking on the horizon for us is that unfunded mandate. But, throats.
Chief, where do you stand with your manpower right now?
We lost 2 today. We're at 143 as of today. In any given week, we probably have 10, 12 people that are on the bench for military leave or administrative leave, workers' comp.
How many are you
personal.
short?
Authorized strength's 154. And like I say, we're at 143 as of today.
And do these salaries in here show at 154?
Yeah, there's a few that are not budgeted for, but has nothing to do with the, the uniform officers. The problem with the chief being down, is that it drives the overtime cost up. I mean, so, and you see, we have budgeted an increase for overtime of about $175,000 from the current year budget. It's a double-edged sword. Our regular salaries may, we may be under budget for our regular salaries, but the overtime drives up. So obviously, the chief's goal is to get his staffing, up, so our overtime can go down and get some more people on the street that we need, And we share that goal. There's a couple, areas that, we're trying to drive towards, and, obviously the dispatch area is one of those areas where it takes time to evolve and get that fully in place. The front office there, that, the civilianized there, but there's a couple things that need to happen in order for that transition to occur. We have not budgeted, the benefits of that. So hopefully, the sooner we take those, the sooner we do that, the more we can benefit from the savings from that. Basically, what we'll do is take those uniform police officers and put them out in the street, and we'll put lower cost people into these other positions. Is that about summarizing?
Yeah, in fact, we're in the process of actually talking to vendors at this point in time to civilianize and take over the dispatch services for police, fire, and ambulance. Actively pursuing those
Right.
current times.
Same with the public safety advocate, too.
That will naturally fall in place because it's tied to the radio for the communication piece.
Chief, can you live with this budget?
Yes, it's very generous. A couple little, I'll send Dave an email, a couple little editing errors that we found in it, but there's nothing that we didn't expect. It's pretty much we expected a flat budget, and we're prepared to make it work for the next year, just like we had the last couple of years. So.
Any other questions? Jeff?
Okay, my turn?
There you go.
A couple of years ago, actually it was 3 years ago, I believe, and 2 years ago, and a year ago, we talked about our radios and our communications and our going to digitalism, opposed to the Motorola squelch units that we currently own and try to refurbish every year. We talked about that. I know you expressed last year was an extreme expense for us. Where are we as far as that goes? Are we moving ahead on that? Are we staying away from it because it's so much money? And if we're staying away from it, are we jeopardizing our policemen and our firemen and our ambulance by not moving ahead on this item?
Well, it's a citywide project, and we've made capital requests probably the last 5 years for this particular project. It is very expensive. I estimate at this point in time, police, fire, and public works is probably a $12 million project. Our radio is probably in much better shape than Chief Harold's or the public works. There's no public safety concerns in my department, but I'm not sure about Chief Harold's department or public works. But we've been making the patches, making the fixes as the problems occur, and we're in pretty good shape. But so we can defer this for a little bit. There's some narrow banding that has to be done at the end of the year. That's going to cost us some money, and that has to be done this year. But that's a project we'd like to see go forward. We had a very extensive study done on it, but we just haven't had the money here in the city of Danbury to move forward.
Okay. And then if I could, just one more question. Vehicles, there's a big concern with all of us as far as the cost of gasoline and the cost of usage of our vehicles. How many vehicles do you estimate, or could you estimate, that are utilized by police officers, detectives, whomever, that at the end of the business day leave and they take home to bring back the next day? I know that many of the departments, they have that. Is there a lot of vehicles? Is it a half a dozen? And I know that contractually, I understand that we're locked into certain officers and certain, well, I think it might have been more than the fire department, but certain people have to take them home. Fire marshals, I know that was one that they were saying, but is there any vehicles, because my concern is vehicles that might leave, and I wish everybody lived in Brookfield, Bethel, Reading, and Ridgefield, but, well, you know, there might be somebody that lives further down the road than our vehicles are traveling.
Sure, we have, had actually labor agreements over that, about 2 years ago, and at that time there was a dozen take-home vehicles. And in our new contract, there's some language that, as, people transition out of those current take-home positions, that we don't have to fill those positions, with additional, or with take-home vehicles. So that's in the future. We're not gonna realize those savings right away, but it is something we've been thinking about, was negotiated in the last contract.
That's all I have. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, the chair to the chief. On 50/50 special duty police, we've got 1750 in actual. And then projected for this year is 7,400, now proposed is 12,000. Could you just talk briefly about that? It seems to be trending in the wrong direction, but then I'm sure there's a reason for it, I just don't know what it is.
That's the special police officers,
Yeah.
and it's, they're used as needed, primarily parade, and we're hoping to run, as we have other years, a car down in Rogers Park this summer, using special police officers, that's what that money's used for. We haven't been using all 12,000, so some of these are transfers, other accounts cover other expenses, but it's, you know, basically $1,000 a month for.
And would this be less expensive than with a full-time officer or something? Is that the general idea?
Oh, it's definitely less
There's some
expensive,
savings
yes.
in here?
Yes,
Save a
there is.
little bit more on special police, save a little bit more on the other end, is that the idea?
More to supplement manpower, just I'm not sure that for the savings aspect of it so much, because it's not such a, it's not a very big operation.
Thanks.
Just, if I may, you know,
Sure.
that's, that was pretty high at one time, and then it started trending down a few years ago, because, just to give you an idea, in 9-10, that was as high as 20,000, and then in 10-11, it dropped down to a couple thousand. And you see the 10-11 here is a couple $1,000, but really, you know, that's kind of an unusual year. So the fact that it's at $12,000 is, you know, the chief, you know, is saying, well, you know, we kind of changed our use for it, and we feel comfortable with that. Because it was as high, if you look at it, it was as high as $60,000.
Yeah, if I may, we're talking about a small amount, but it does jump out, the fact that it went from 17 to 12, so, you know, but this is, basically, it's a rounding error on this. Thank you.
Councilman Cole?
Just a quick question. Obviously, I have a concern with this process too.
Sure.
In that, are you gonna be putting any more on? In that they are such a savings to the city when they are on duty, you can put two in a car for the price of one regular. Shouldn't we have more? We've given you in the contract a way to get more certified officers so that we don't have to pay for their certification. Couldn't we add some to what we have? There's so few left that you can't get them to cover Rogers Park for you
Yeah,
anymore.
well, that's one of the problems. You know, and keeping up with the training mandates is another issue, but we could certainly look at bringing on more specialists. That's a decision the mayor would have to make, but someone could look at it.
It's in the contract this year that if a regular retires on a regular pension, he can apply to be a special.
Okay, just remember, I've been here 7 years, and in that time, only 2 people have there on a regular pension.
Yeah, okay, that's true.
Go ahead.
Just one other thing I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. I know last year I was contacted early on in the year and I spoke to you about the Explorers Group. Just for peace of mind for everybody out there, the Explorers, we're still funding the Explorers, we're still anticipating the Explorers to be carried as, in the same aspect as they have been in the past.
Yeah, that's line 5855, contributions and grants, and we pay their charter fees, basically. And there's a hidden subsidy and some salaries that, and some overtime that we pay that supervise them, so.
Okay.
But yeah, there's no change. They're a very active program. There's probably 75 members right now, and some success stories we're very proud of.
David, you had something?
One of the things that you see in the proposed by department, we kind of separated that is the request of capital. I know the chief had requested $639,000 as part of his automotive equipment. However, we looked at the line from last year. Last year, we allocated 250, but we increased that to 400 this year. And the reason why we handle that differently over the last couple of years than we had previously is that money goes over year after year. And, you know, the chief is not forced to use that in any one year. He can roll it over and use it as he needs to use it. So one year he may strategically decide not to buy as many vehicles, and then next year he may decide to buy more vehicles. And this past year actually was that kind of situation, because you change over from using one type of vehicle to another. It kind of came to mind. And so you had some extra money from the previous year that you rolled into this current year. And so he ended up having $400,000 in the current year because he had money left over from the previous year. So even though budgetarily it looked like he only had 250, he actually had close to 400. So, so next year we're proposing 400 as part of the capital.
Any ex officio members have any questions? Any other questions? Thank you, Chief.
May I throw you to the animal control real quick?
Yeah, okay,
I'm-
sure.
I'm here to represent.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks.
263.
258.
263.
You're in the face.
And then going to the 260, that might be a little bit easier to follow, 260. To take it too bad because.
My 260 is a blank page.
We won't have much to say then.
Oh, it's very flat, it's like $2,000 difference.
Does anyone else have a blank page on 260?
Yeah, I got-
Pie chart, that's where you
Pie
want it.
chart.
On the pie chart. Okay. You can pitch it however you want to achieve it.
Well, it's just,
Whatever you're comfortable with, but.
Very flat budget for animal control, and they do a, fantastic job covering the whole city with basically 2 animal control officers. And, budget increase here, the city supported the animal control funds by an increase of $8,000, primarily fuel and, your wage increases, but otherwise there's no additional programs or any fancy purchases or anything like that. It's a very lean budget.
The big caveat, the big change this year between the prior years is that we're setting up, in anticipation of a purchase of a new vehicle probably in 3 or 4 years, because we just purchased one 2 years ago. We know that every 5 years they're gonna purchase some kind of, animal vehicle. We set aside $14,000 in reserve. And that, we wanna be in a position where we don't have to go out and spend $40,000 for a fully equipped vehicle for the animal, to take care of the animal. So we'll set that up and start building a reserve for that, for that kind of purchase. Or in the past, what they had requested is for a refrigerator unit. I kind of kid about that every year, but it is a real need that they have for the animal control service center.
David, I have a question. The dog license fees, do those monies stay with us or do they go somewhere else?
Bulk of it, I think, we keep a portion of it and then the bulk goes to the state.
Right, yeah.
We keep a small fraction.
Looks like 5. That's the proposed. Yeah, the state gets to.
Any other questions?
That's all.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Chief Harold, you're in the hot seat.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. bow tie.
I don't have my bow tie on, but I brought my friend with me. I want you to listen very carefully.
You're on television. You're on television. Page 165.
He makes my day fun.
Hey, David, you want to start it off? Or?
Yes, thank you. Okay. On page 165, we have the fire department. We noticed their amended budget is about 11.6, and their proposed budget is about 11.6. No significant change in there. As you know, the contract has not been settled, so we have not put in any increases we have no contractual increases within fire department. However, there have been a certain amount of shifts within the individual line items. Again, you'll see some increases within the motor fuel line item because we do anticipate those costs going up. Excuse me. Some of the other line items are just kind of adjusted slightly, but for the most part, they remain relatively flat. You'll notice one noticeable change under the contribution grants, 15,000 under the 5855. That was for the training school. It's not really a contribution grant. That was pretty much miscategorized previously. So we set up a new line item under 55020001, maintain building training school. And if you notice, that's actually an increase this year up to 20,390. And it's probably just about the only one increase our department got. But you know, there's been a certain amount of shifts around in here. The lease equipment line dropped significantly because there's a lease coming off. And those funds, that $45,000 net reduction has been reallocated throughout other line items where the chief felt necessary, felt he needed the money. So the bottom line is not a whole lot of change between last year and this year in the overall budget, but some lines were impacted, and so the money was reallocated where needed.
Chief, just for the record, maintaining the buildings, the volunteer buildings and your building, that comes out of your budget, not public buildings budget, correct? Now, do they assist you in any way, public buildings?
Public buildings assist us with personnel and help when they can, when they have, people that are not necessarily working on the schools or something. He's come over, he's been very helpful, and he both assigning people to actually do the work as well as giving me advice on what needs to be done. Yeah, they've been very helpful, showing and very well.
There's been a new capital item proposed in the mayor's capital budget, and that's a ladder truck, and that's about $1,050,000, and we're proposing to lease that probably over 10 years. So we're going to see whether 10 or 7 years is a better deal for us. We're not sure yet.
That's a lease purchase, though, right?
Lease purchase, of course. Yeah, we don't do any other.
I would like to note that that price was effective last November.
So.
It's probably,
So we're gonna, we'll have to, and that's under the new, I think, if I understood you correct the other night, that's using the new engine, or.
yeah, that's got,
jump engine, right?
it's got the new urea-based engine for cleaning the exhaust.
So there may be some added operational costs that will have to.
There will be some fairly significant costs added.
And the two pumpers are from the previous year or two ago, I can't remember. But
2010.
and then the air pack replacement program is still in effect. That if you recall, that started a few years ago. It was a $450,000 program, and we're in year 3. And so this proposed budget will bring that amount up to 350 of the 450. So in the next budget year after this, there'll be another $100,000 application in there for a total commitment of $450. Is that?
Roughly, yeah, that's very accurate.
You got anything to say?
I wanted to talk a little bit about our current situation with personnel. I'd like to start off by reminding everybody that having turned back that federal grant, we were unable to hire. We still have 14 vacancies right now, and with the number of people that are out on long-term injury and sick leave, similar to what Chief Baker was talking about, that's driving our overtime up a little bit. The one thing I want to point out that's most critical here is that our overtime currently is at flat rate. They don't get time and a half, they get straight time. So though that number is pretty significant and gonna be fairly significant for this year by the end of the year, it is straight time, so that, keeping that in mind, you gotta realize that as high as it is, it means you're still, better than breaking even as far as hiring some new people. So at that point, our salaries and overtime budget, as the salaries drop, the overtime does increase, but at the flat level of pay, it's really a better deal for the taxpayers at this point. And so far, despite the increase, we haven't begun to notice anything in the way of increased sick time or injury leave, which may eventually happen if there's so much overtime being generated. To that, David, did you want to address the funding of that stream?
Well, it's the same as what we've seen in police, very, very similar to police, and somewhat similar to public works, but mostly, police and fire are very similar in this. Whereas, on this regular salary side, if they're down a significant amount of people, you're gonna see a complete a direct correlation on the overtime. Because they've got a certain minimum staffing, and you're gonna you have to fill the positions. So, what we do during the year as we project out, Jeff and I sit down and say, all right, Jeff, what are you gonna need? So we'll do a reallocation from regular salaries into overtime salaries. And the overtime that you see in the proposed budget is an increase from the adopted budget, the current year adopted budget, although it's lower than what it's projected or in the projected budget. However, if he hires a few people, then he could be right on. But even so, if 840 happens to be too low, then we'll just do a shift from regular salaries. That's what that is.
The ladder truck is a critical part in our replacement policy. As you know, we get 10 good years out of a fire truck here in Danbury, and we do get it out of them. We use our trucks. And the truck we're replacing now is 12 years old, so we've kind of really gone past our real desirable limit, and we're gonna, hopefully that thing will stay in service over the next several months. The problem is that it takes somewhere around 9 months or so to build out a truck once we actually order it. So if we order it, say, in July after the first start of the budget, we probably won't even have the truck until after the end of the year and in the next calendar year. So we're kind of, we're holding things together. It's operational. Downtime has increased, but we're still going to make it work. With this budget, we'll see no change in service, no reduction in service, no reduction in the safety of the citizens and the residents of the city of Danbury. You won't have any trouble with that. We can perform all our actions, activities. We're gonna be tight on some maintenance, voluntary or, optional maintenance, we're gonna have to put off. We'll keep everything else running. I don't anticipate that this is gonna in any way impact our serviceability to the citizens at all.
Any questions? Paul?
Yeah, thanks, through the chair to David. Could you just touch on how we pay for the truck? If we're ordering it in July, we put down a deposit and then there's 10 equal payments on a lease or something like that, or do we do our first payment next year? How's that gonna work?
Well, it depends on what's required. Sometimes we need to put down a deposit, and sometimes, because we've done business with this, company or the company that we're doing with, it's just something from the council saying it's our intent to make the purchase, and that binds us.
Yeah, and very often, there's also this, if you put on a certain amount of money up front, and I believe they call it the chassis cost, like if you basically pay for the chassis and get up there, it kind of reduces some of your overall costs later.
Right.
So we gotta figure that out as we go along, and once we get into the nuts and bolts of the actual agreement, that'll be decided on.
Basically, the ideal solution would be to make a down payment, and the cost, the payments would probably start late in the year. But we would roll this 115, that's why we set it aside in the capital, roll it forward. And that may allow us to actually reduce our repayment period from 10 years to 7 years and get a better rate. So, you know, it's things like that, you know, and will help us maybe recover some of the, you know, the increasing costs from last November to now.
Well, I'd like to also piggyback on earlier comments regarding the radio system. As Chief Baker mentioned, that, you know, their particular radio system is a little bit better than ours. One of the things that you see in our capital budget, there's a $20,000 chunk of money in the capital budget for the city, for the fire department, and that's to upgrade our radios. That's mandated by the federal government right now because of the FCC rules on narrow banding. So we're gonna have to go through and change some of the components. A lot of it's simply reprogramming our portables, but we are gonna have to expend most of that $20,000 to help that. And we think that's enough. We've got it pretty narrowed down, and it's also gonna involve redoing some of the volunteer radios as well. And everything has to happen in a very short amount of time, including the ambulance radios. So what we're looking for is sometime over the next couple of months, we're gonna put together a date and time and try to do everything in a very narrow frame of time, probably 5 days. Get all of our radios done, the volunteer radios done, the ambulances done, and get all this done in enough time to meet the mandate, which is January 1 of 2013. That's,
2013?
2013, so next January on the first of the year, we have to have these narrow, otherwise we're subject to fines and whatever. The FCC can decide to do those.
That's changing the frequency, you know, for the narrow band. That's not replacement of the whole.
Yeah, it's not
radio
replacing
system.
radios.
It's another band.
And we are still, as the Al Baker also alluded to, in the process of negotiating the changeover to civilianized dispatch. And at the same time, we're also negotiating with our union what that looks like, because we have 8 positions in the fire department that are currently assigned to dispatch. We actually only have 3 dispatchers in those positions currently, but they're being filled by firefighters. So in our contractual obligations, there are 8 positions that are still under discussion. And depending on how those discussions go and when that happens, some of those salaries may or may not be freed up in time to assist with this contract.
Jack, you have a question?
Line 5851, I would assume that's the volunteers.
Is that the contribution?
Fund
Yes.
contributed, con and
Yes,
per, and
that's the-
that's the.
I think that's the same number for the
Which
last
is
several
flat lines,
years.
has been flat line
Yes.
for the last several years.
Yep.
So they haven't gone through any of the cuts through the last, because I have several friends, as we all do, that are volunteer firemen.
Right.
I visit frequent a lot of the volunteer firehouses, so just for the record, we haven't made any cuts here over the last several years. We heard earlier, we've had 10%, 10%, 5%, 10%.
Well,
So,
Well, let me
This is
first
a-
interject. They
Well, I just don't know,
haven't
you know.
had a raise in over 10 or 11,
I
12
know
years.
they haven't had a cut in the last 4, so.
Exactly.
So that's where I'm at on that. So, but the point being is that 425, 372, how do we, what do we do with that? How do we dispense that money?
If I may address the first part of it, and then the second, I'm gonna redirect, okay? The priorities for the city, you know, which is clear from a budgetary standpoint, has always been public safety. And that's why, you know, cuts you're not gonna see. We may flatline or reallocate, and, you know, we work with the public safety departments to see, you know, what can we do to ensure, you know, the best, you know, best, we commit to the equipment, we wanna ensure that the safety needs are being met, and that we're on the latest and greatest to ensure that. So, you know, and you know, education is very important in public works. The other departments, have really taken the hit. So, not that you guys, all the other ones haven't, they felt the pain, but as far as cuts, you're not gonna see it in, as severely, or you're not gonna see real cuts. You're gonna see a slowdown. They're not gonna get everything that they want as quickly as they want, but, you know, that they've been paid, but not the kind of pain that, you know, they've been very smart in how they've used their money, let me put it that way. You know, how that 425 has been utilized, that's really, I'll redirect to the chief right now, but.
The actual utilization is the funds, once it's been divided among the 12 companies, it goes into their fund, and they use it as they see fit to fund their operations. Remember, there's 6 of the engine houses that are out there for the volunteers that belong to the city that we maintain. So those particular companies would get a somewhat lesser amount of money. The money, they're each a different number. They're not specifically all the same, like $23,000 a year or something. But the houses that we own and maintain, they get a slightly lesser stipend than the people that own their own firehouses and their own fire trucks. And I'm not gonna go into the actual distribution of the money because, like I said, there's 12 different numbers there.
I think that my concern in listening to some of the different firehouses that have come to me over the last year or 2 years, is that you get one firehouse that's saying, hey, we've all gotten the same, which we've been given the same number, so I can understand it. We've all gotten the same number for the past 2 or 3 years. Our firehouse needs it more than this firehouse, and this firehouse is more successful because they get more money than that firehouse. We have no control over that, correct? You have no control.
Absolutely correct.
That's all done through the volunteer fire
Correct.
department. Okay. That's all I had there. And then if I couldn't, just one more question. You heard me ask earlier of the police chief, how many take-home vehicles he had. I would assume you had time to think about it.
I've actually.
So you probably know
This
that.
is not the first time I've been thinking about it. I've been aware of it. You know,
Yeah.
we know it's on everybody's mind. It's gotta be on everybody's mind. I have 13 people that can be assigned vehicles. Currently, only 11 of them use it. I have 2 people that have a vehicle that generally don't take it home or use it, and have it for years and years. Of the 13, myself and the deputy are 2. I have 7 fire marshals, and I have 3 staff officers.
Okay, that's all I have.
I'm sorry, 2 staff officers actually use the vehicle. The third one is one of the ones that doesn't.
Any other questions? Thank you, chief.
Can I mention one thing?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know that, you know, the volunteers are somewhat near and dear to me, and the chief has worked with the volunteers in a great way. The relationship between the volunteers and the career department has improved considerably over the years. But they've also not received any increase, but at the same time, they've absorbed a lot of cost when it comes to their medicals, they've absorbed that cost, as well as costs for training that could not be incorporated in here, but is required to meet the necessary standards that the department has. So bear in mind, these flatline, they haven't taken a cut, but they really have, because they've incurred more cost.
Why don't you time that when the fire department comes by?
They called me just like out on the table. I'm sorry.
Do the ambulance, once we have the chief here.
Yeah, okay. All right, we'll go to the ambulance. Anybody have the ambulance?
Yeah, you can answer it, yeah.
All right, page 256.
Okay, I'm gonna kind of direct you to 255 first, and then we'll just, I'm sorry, 256. And then I'll take you to the the overall budget for the ambulance fund is slightly less by a couple $100,000. All right, and that's mostly due because of the way we're looking at the ambulance fund. Budgetarily last year, they weren't treated as an enterprise fund. This year, they're going to be treated as an enterprise fund, which means last year we used the operating transfer out as to the general fund, and we put in a number of 750. This year, that number is going to be reduced to 450. And because we think 450 is more in line with what the services that the general fund provides to the ambulance fund. And that entails, administrative is a small piece, and that means all the stuff that my office, some of the stuff that other offices do for the ambulance fund. But most importantly, the largest share is the first responders, and the costs associated with that. And first responders that are in the police department, primarily the fire department, are the ones that are at the scene first. And that has a cost for this entity called the ambulance fund. And as an enterprise fund, we want to fully cost that department out. What does it cost to run it? So in order to have a true cost, we need to assign all the associated costs, including, the first responders. So the reduction in it is a direct, it is really related primarily to the reduction of the operating transfer out, which is now gonna be called the chargeback, the professional services, city admin charges, and the first responder charges. And you can see that, you know, on 256, but you can also see it graphically on 253. But there are also some other exciting things going on that Chief Earl and Matt Casadecchia, who's our the Chief Administrator of the Ambulance Fund, have been working on, so we can, you know, really utilize that emergency service, which is, you know, overseen by the chief, to best serve the community. Because you've got you've got really three-legged stool, and I'll let you expand on that. Because I think it is something that it needs to be highlighted, that's not necessarily highlighted from the financial standpoint, but there's a lot of exciting things going on that's gonna truly benefit the community. And these resources that are here are gonna be dedicated to promote that cause which you're overseeing, so.
What he's referring to is a number of programs we're trying to implement. One of the things that's shown up nationwide in studies over the last decade, as you can imagine, is the evolution of fire and emergency services. Over the last 2 decades, and we'll go back 20 years, the fire load has dropped precipitously, and the medical load has increased. Right now, over 60% of the fire department calls are basically medical calls, first responder calls. And at the same time, the ambulance calls have increased. And the expense of an ambulance to respond, treat, and transport to the hospital is a certain number. And it's a fairly high number because it's expensive to keep that service operation. One of the things that's happening now is that they're trying to find ways, and I say they are municipal officers like yourselves, trying to find ways to better that model, to reduce the cost of providing that service. And one of the things that we found is that we're going to look into modeling a program similar to what the very successful city of Danbury is already doing with the unit. As you know, the unit is a combination of fire marshal, building, police, and health department, and they have been extremely effective. So what we're forming is another similar type committee between the emergency services and the fire department that will at times include the health department and or police services. What this particular group will do, similar to the unit, will be community oriented, it'll be community educating, but it will also be out in the community to address, for example, somebody has a neighbor who's somebody, and you've all seen this on television, a hoarder. Somebody who hoards all this stuff, creates a house, creates a health hazard in their home or in a condo. This other group now, the new unit we'll call it, we haven't come up with a full name yet for it, will go out and address the people with the idea that if we can reduce the potential for a call later, either medical or fire emergency services, we'll save that money on that end. So what this means is you'll get a proactive team. It's called paramedicine. It's a situation where, for example, Mrs. Smith, an elderly woman who is on a number of medications, is at home, and instead of her having to call an ambulance to go to the hospital, the ambulance or a paramedic or somebody can stop by their home on a regular basis, once a week, every 2 weeks, confirm that she's okay, and make sure that medications are there. And the end result is fewer taxes for service, fewer needs for service for the ambulance, which is a very expensive item. A couple of programs like that we're looking into, mainly hinging on public education, reducing fire and emergency medical loads. It's going to be a huge thing, and it's right now we're at the forefront of it, and we're actually looking into perhaps getting some grants and looking to see just how successful this can be. We have a lot of hope and a lot of faith in this. It's going to be a really unique and very well-serving program.
Thank you, Chief.
Got a question on 5210, fringe benefits.
Yep.
What are they?
Chief's trip to Florida.
Yeah,
No, it's Las Vegas this year.
Las Vegas this year.
second car.
Oh, yeah.
Which question?
What are they, what are fringe benefits?
Fringe benefits, those are gonna be all the insurances and all that. It really, under the ambulance, it's
But now,
It's
is the
all-
ambulance, are the ambulance employees of ours or employees of the hospital? So why are we paying the fringe benefits?
We asked them to separate all the costs like we would, they're not our employees. I mean, just, we could have one lump sum called contract services, but we wanna keep track of all these costs separately. All right, and it helps us to really keep control of the whole contract. So historically, we're able to see, you know, what have been, the allocated costs for regular salaries, fringe benefits, motor fuel, all these associated costs within that. And that's the way we structured it, you know. Even though they're not our employees, we wanna know the individual components that make up the total cost of administering the ambulance fund. So, you know, the terminology is just slightly different, we lump it all together, unlike in the general fund side where we actually break it out, dental, health insurance, prescription, you know, all that, we just lump it all together.
Any other questions? Andrew?
Through the chair to either David or to the chief, line 5338, other miscellaneous services.
I'm sorry, I don't have that.
I'm sorry.
Copy of it.
It's 238,500. What would that possibly kind of just entail, that lump sum?
Fire department.
Miscellaneous services. I'm thinking it's more of a, operational software and all that other stuff that go with this, but I can get back to you on some clarification on that. I don't know offhand, to be honest with you, but that's usually when we throw all that kind of stuff in. Because there's a lot of different software that we use to administer. Jeff, it's EMS charts and
Yeah.
other stuff, it's certainly not 238, but
Yeah, I don't know.
there's a bunch of stuff that we throw into there,
Okay.
but I can get back to you.
Any other questions? Thanks again, chief. What I'm gonna do, is there anybody from the building inspector here? Anybody who's down here, I'm gonna bypass them, we'll go back to them at the end. So I can take care of the people that are here.
Congratulations.
Where did Paul go? He was the next up.
He's gonna step into the basement for
Okay.
5 or 10 minutes, but he'll be back.
Sean, you're in. Unit. 176, page 176.
Want me to just give you the highlights? The current year amended budget is about $129,000, and the proposed budget is about $124,000. A reduction primarily in the part-time salaries. When the proposed budget was put in, that is fully loaded with all staff positions. It did not include any of the unbudgeted positions, and that's, that's why you see the biggest difference between the 271 and 123.
Well, David, I noticed here now does the deputy fire marshal's salary come out of this budget, and is it taken out of the fire department budget?
It is adjusted on the fire department side, and that's part of that negative offset that you're seeing.
Any questions?
Paul? Yeah, well, through the chair to Sean, listen, without repeating any of the stories that have been in the media in the last couple of weeks, phrasing this delicately, do you feel safe in the execution of your duties?
I do. My wife often, my wife is often concerned, you know, with the safety from the standpoint of I'm going into people's homes and things of that nature. Of course, I work with a police officer Utter whenever it aligns with his schedule. But for the most part, it's often just me out in the field. Yeah, I feel safe. I'm very conscious of my surroundings and what I put myself in or not. I did inquire with Chief Baker about safety training that is commonly offered for police officers. And he sent me a link to check into. The cost is, it's high. It's $800, $900 for a program. It's not within my budget. I haven't pursued it further than that by checking in with Dave and Mary Mallon. But for the most part, yeah, I feel safe.
If I may.
There have been some
I know.
situations, some occurrences, but, you know, again, the answer to your question is yes.
From a budgetary standpoint, you know, something like that wouldn't have any impact on, you know, it shouldn't impact your decision on whether to pursue that or not. You know, safety has gotta be a number one concern. So if that's something that you feel that you need to do, then you certainly, you know, put it forward. You know, that's not an issue for us.
Thank you.
So,
I'll follow up with you
yeah.
according to that. Okay, thank you.
Well, Sean, you know how I feel about the unit. I just think it's one of the best things the mayor ever did. And you do an outstanding job. You know, I know just in my neighborhood, every time I've called you, you're down there within an hour, and the
Thank
problem
you.
gets solved. So I appreciate everything you do for the city.
I appreciate it. You know, residents, I hear a lot of accolades from residents, and of course, conversely, there's residents who feel, you know, you can never do it quick enough or good enough. But, you know, we try as hard as we can. We take pride in the fact that, in a calendar year, we tackle probably about 1,100 different issues or so throughout the year. 40% of it, which is proactive on our part, not complaint oriented. So going from one inspection to another and seeing something, just pulling off and tackling it then and there. So we feel that for the small dollar amount that is our department requires, the residents get a pretty big bang for the buck. And, you know, to what Chief Harold mentioned before about the paramedicine concept, I feel that can be a pretty successful program. Matt did connect with me, and I brought him out on a couple of different calls, and there were a lot of different parallels to what we do and how we do it to how it can help them.
Any questions? Thank you, Sean.
Great, thank you very much.
Nobody disagrees. Pat, I'm gonna call on you next, because that way you can go. There's no sense you hanging around.
Sounds
We got a
good.
couple of long ones here. So why don't you, we'll do the veterans advisory.
Sure.
You think he's not gonna be a long one?
Yeah.
Let me tell you something.
Page 208.
You don't know what I got coming up.
208.
Ah,
Okay, page 208. Current year budget is 57,568. The proposed budget was 64,450. We gave a slight bump from the current year budget to 59,68. Basically, like Sean, you know, Pat is incredibly tight with the dollar, of course, which I appreciate. So when they do have needs, whether it's training or anything else, you know, there's always, you know, I know they're not gonna come in with some ridiculous request. When they come in, it's something that they truly need. So, you know, I know they've done their homework, and it's an easy, it's usually a pretty easy thing to say yes to. So, without, but that's about it. There's no real significant change in here on your budget.
Pat, got anything to say?
I'm a bargain.
Thanks for the bargain.
He's a bargain.
Hey, I gotta admit though, you're one of the few guys with an increase though. You got an increase. It's more than.
Well, I did, but I didn't.
I know.
It's in the budget, but the bands for the Memorial Day Parade, you know, they have to replace their uniforms and travel with the gas with the buses, and so it's a constant thing that we're trying to keep this parade going, because it's one of the biggest parades in Connecticut. So, That, you know, that's the end. I mean, when I leave here, if you feel free to add to that, you're welcome. I'll see you. Take care now. Bye-bye. We'll see you. Take care.
He's truly
Bye.
a bard.
Bye-bye.
He's not
Tell you
kidding.
what, seeing you're the only one in the room, Scott, I'll call you next. Page 204.
I'm the first referring to page 205, which is kind of the summary. The amended budget is 1,358,000, and the proposed was a little bit less than that, 1,343,000. The proposed in the department, proposed in there is, it's a little less than that, 1,303,000. The primary difference is really in the 5% reduction to the grant agencies. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot of difference in the individual line items, some slight changes here and there. But it's really a reallocation along the lines.
Go ahead.
Well, Dave did a good job of summing up everything. This is, of course, before what other people have called unfunded mandates. And, this everybody does know. We're projecting a drought. I think the U.S. government is projecting a drought, which is a lot like what happened in 1999, 2000 with the West Nile virus activity. So every year we've kind of gotten away with one, maybe two treatments. And if it spikes, we'll do more, and we have to come back for some reallocations. But those are only about $5,000 a piece, which is a bargain for what we did.
Are you talking about storm drains or something?
Right, yeah, the treatment is storm drains. But that's just me, you know, projecting into the future. We're gonna do one and then see how it goes, and hopefully the rain comes and we don't have any droughts. But that's about the only thing besides a couple contractual items which may come up. I usually find the money within what we save and other line item to cover things.
One thing I did mention earlier, when we're going over the buildings department is trying to work out something with Jim Maloney. And that's why we have broken out the WIP building and the old jail. So if we are able to have Jim take the WIP portion, we can better identify those costs associated with his occupancy of that space. And that's why we broke out that within the building. And so Scott is working on a possible contractual arrangement to take that piece, manage that. That sound about right?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, well, that's been a long-term plan, was to move from the older building, the energy efficient building, the one that didn't fit, get into the new space, and that operates great, and obviously, we can park.
Once again, I'm just amazed, your department is another one that I can't believe the work that we get out of your department and what you do for the city. I mean, the monthly reports, it's just amazing what you do. And I look at this budget and I say, wow, we're getting our money's worth out of you, so.
Well, thank you, we do try, always try to keep, the part-timers really do keep us on track, let alone I have to find them and hire them and train them. But other than that, we do have a good crew, both part-timers and full-timers. They work very, very well together.
Now, do you think that program that we just agreed
Later,
to,
Danbury.
is gonna help you out?
The paraprofessional.
Yeah, the
Paramedical unit.
Yeah.
It sounds like a great idea. We would have to take a look at who goes out on what, which is the same as with the unit. It would help the residents, because I get a lot of phone calls all the time about the ambulance drivers and the paramedics not being able to get into places. There is a program right now.
No, that's not the one I'm talking about is the one where we're gonna, the people that are unemployed.
Oh, that one, the
That
training.
program, is that gonna help? Yeah,
I like
that's the one I meant.
Oh, actually, I would like to and I have a call in, and say, I have a person for me that might be able to fund grants. So I want to use that person to try and find either myself some grants, or if they find others where the department's actually forward on. So I'm actually trying to find things for that, much like, they'll tell back to the paramedic unit, we can find some philanthropies to fund that, that would be great. So I'm gonna try to use that person for that, really, so. I can't hire inspectors, but obviously the grant, for a person with a grant, Christopher Freeman.
Jack?
Yeah, first of all, Scott, and I'm glad that Paul's here now. I have to write the consent calendar every month, and during the consent calendar, we'll write about who applied for grants and got grants, and you two have a contest going of who's the best, I have to tell you, because between your department and your department, I write up more consents on the grant monies that you bring to this city, so if the Board of Ed, because I know they fired their grant writer a couple of years back, if they're looking for good grant writers, these two gentlemen definitely need to be in the interview process, because they definitely know how to do it. Question for you, and I received an email earlier today from the Women's Center questioning, and rightfully so, maybe this is to David, on line item 5855. We amended the budgets of the Women's Center by the 5% we've been talking, as well as to the Danbury Youth Services by the 5% we've been talking. No, yet we didn't, CIFC is what? CIFC is,
It's the Kansas Institute of Families and Children.
why did we not cut them?
Well, that's Jim Maloney's group, right?
Yeah.
That goes to, because he's gonna be taking on the WIC program. That we anticipate that he's gonna take on the WIC program, so there's an additional, you know, he's doing something additional.
Okay, so
And,
there's,
you know, at the time that we did this, we fully expect that that's going to happen. So rather than give them something new and cut them, it just didn't make sense to us.
okay. There's an answer.
You know, even though that's a fully separate program, there's still gonna be some transitional cost involved with that. You know, it just, you know, for a reason of a few $1,000s, you think that could help offset some of that transitional cost.
And we don't anticipate him coming back for additional.
Oh, he'll come back.
You know, okay, as long as we got that list.
Well, I always say if you're a grant agency, it's always good to partner with other departments with other things, and just keep on doing the same thing. But if you prove you can do something amazing for that, so put on your grant application.
Okay. You're the best. Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Thanks, guys.
That's it.
All right, well, you got elderly services too?
No, I don't.
Well, you don't.
No, she's not here.
Okay. All right, then I'm gonna go back, Paul, you're on. Yes. So I can get you out of here.
Thank you.
So preparedness, page 172.
What page, Phil?
172.
Okay. With that, this year this year's budget, next year's budget, they're flat. The big difference between the two, what was being proposed by the department and what is proposed by the mayor is really the department proposed a $50,000 increase for the use of the War Memorial Facility. And I think that, I'll let you talk to that, Paul, but basically had more to do with the heavy use of the current year.
For the last 50-plus years, we've used the War Memorial for probably more events than any one particular city facility that I could ever remember. I've lived here all my life. The War Memorial serves a number of uses for us. One of them primarily is the shelter. That's where everybody goes, no matter what the issue is, whether we're putting up one person or we're putting up 200-300 people. We use that facility quite a bit. The sewer, the water, the locker rooms, the gymnasium, we store our cots and the blankets there. I've been known to call and say I need the gym now, and then games that they've been utilizing have been stopped. People have vacated very nicely. They cooperate with us at all times. And I've called them at 2 AM in the morning, and I've called them at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or 10 o'clock in the morning. So that is why I had put in there for the 100,000, but certainly I can live with the 50,000. The city CBDG grant monies are gonna help us make the men's locker room this year, and hopefully the women's locker room next year, handicap accessible. This past year, when the Ice Center lost its boilers, both of them, they had no hot water. And we tried to assist them by bringing them down to the War Memorial, but the canes and the walkers just couldn't get over the lip that was not very high, but yet for an elderly person, it's tough. So they were very gracious this year to give us the money to go in and rehab it so there's no lift and it's handicap accessible in the men's locker room, and then the women's will follow. Most of the plumbing is done on the men's side for some reason when they designed it, when they built it decades ago. Had it been the women's side with all the plumbing underneath it, we probably would have done that one first. But we're starting with the stuff that's buried in the walls and buried in the floors to get it going.
Right. A question was asked, I think, in the last meeting about, you know, in a situation like this where the request is made significantly higher than what is granted, how else do we help out? Well, you know, in this situation, you know, we try to find money elsewhere, whether it's CDBG or LOSA, and we're often able to do it. Maybe not in the current year, but we bring it to the front of the line, and when money becomes available, we do it. And this situation, we're able to provide the handicap accessible bathroom. You know, a little history on this: for the last 4 years, we've been, you know, spent at $50,000. Prior to that, a few years prior to that, it was at $75,000, and then prior to that, it was at $85,000. So 10 years ago, it was at $85,000. But you know, there are different ways that we help out, and you know that's going to be a pretty expensive project. It's got to be at least $50,000, if not $100,000. I think it's closer to 100.
Closer to 100, yeah.
It's a $100,000 project, so they're not getting the whole 100, they're giving 50, but instead of giving them another $100,000 project on top of it. So they're getting 150 instead of, you know, and that's how we look at things.
When you put together the budget, the time frame that we're given, a lot of things don't come to reality until later on. And David's office has been very helpful in keeping the War Memorial afloat, so that we can go in there and utilize it when we do have an emergency. I think last year we used it 4 times.
One of the things that was, you know, that was an observation, that we're very fortunate that most of those events happen during the warm weather. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So some people were shut in, and they were without their facilities for an extended period of time. And really, that's where the push of what we heard from Chief Harold talking about, you know, that Matt Casavecchia and the chief are really, you know, blazing new ground. I mean, that's an incredible project they're going to undertake. That's going to be a tremendous community service. That's going to tie right into the, you know, civil preparedness too. You know, the unit-like thing. They're going to do an outreach program. So for those shut-ins, you know, during an event like that, they can identify those folks. You know, they may not be able to get down to there, and so how are you going to deal with that, right? So you're going to have that whole network be devised, and so we're able, you know, the ambulance fund is at a level now where now they can foster these kind of programs and look at the emergency services as a complete service overall, combined with the, you know, the police, the fire, the ambulance, civil preparedness, et cetera. So
We had 490 overnights in shelter for the month of October, the end of October to November. we did about 6,000 snacks and 1,470 meals. We also did between 600 and 800 people a day for the showers. Because we had 66% of the city without electricity at that time. And of course, it started to subside once the electricity came back online. But, you know, with the total picture that was painted from the fire chief and EMS and what David's been able to do for everything, we're dealing with it. And I think I'll be able to deal with it again next year, hopefully as good as I dealt with it in past year.
Well, let's hope you don't have to.
I hope I don't either.
Any questions? Oh,
Yeah, through the chair to Paul. You know, we got hit pretty hard, obviously, and we don't need to revisit that, but some communities were completely destroyed. I didn't have power or anything for way longer than we did. I lost my cell phone, for instance, for a couple of days. I mean, I still had a landline, so I was okay, and then I had rudimentary internet. But people didn't have cell phones, didn't have landlines, didn't have anything. I was just curious about this, and you don't have to get into it in any great detail, but I know we've dabbled with shortwave. Did we have to resort to that during the period? Did anybody in Connecticut, and if so, did we play a part in that?
You know, it's interesting you bring that up because I called Verizon, who's one of our wireless carriers here, and I asked for them to bring in what they call a COW, a cell tower on wheels. And that portable cell tower on wheels would give us the communications back. Because we did identify that Comcast cable was down, AT&T UVerse was down, and consequently the internet was down, and the cell phones were down, and people who converted from landline to cell phone. My request was finally answered in 3 different fashions within the same 24-hour period. The Verizon said you don't need it, we got plenty of cell phone coverage. The State of Connecticut Office of Emergency Management said, why are you asking for this? And finally, somebody got back to me at 2 a.m. in the morning the following day after I made the request and said, geez, you know, we might be able to help you. I says, forget it, because I've gotten so much grief in the last 24 hours, I don't know whether I'm coming or going at this point. And if you don't have enough brains to know that people have converted to cell phones and that's their lifeline for the 911 system, I don't know what to tell you people 60 miles away. I really don't. And I gave it to Verizon. In fact, I got permission from the mayor to go to a conference up in Massachusetts, and where they had some executives, and I very politely said to them, look, I know where all your cell towers are here in the city of Danbury because I have to sign off on them as the airport administrator. And consequently, the whole Western Division was out of service, even though they were in buildings with no power in them. I said, I don't understand what you don't know about your own system, but it's an embarrassment. And I also told that to the state EOC through my area rep. I said, this is crazy. When somebody asks for something, there shouldn't be an argument about it. Yeah, I was right on it, but the people that had control over it didn't want to know, which annoys me.
any other questions? Well, Paul, thanks for all you do.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, David.
Yeah, no, on a personal note, thanks a lot for the whole October thing, and getting that stuff cleaned up. We bumped into each other a half a dozen times over the next 23 weeks, and it was 24/7 with you. It was amazing.
Yeah, we got a good community.
I mean, you were the go-to guy.
Thank you all.
If you want, Paul, you probably update that on the reimbursement if you want at this point.
Well,
Yeah, I wouldn't mind hearing that.
oh, I'm reimbursed.
How many yards and how many tons and how many, you know?
And you got us 10 million more, right?
Oh, my God. The long and short of it is the mayor announced 2.8 million. And certainly, that was a preliminary number. And I'm working with David and his staff, especially David. Him and I have been trading back and forth emails. I went into the contract and I found on the state of Connecticut contract, that's what we're operating on. Page 47 says 4-1. Now, simple math to me is simple math. I mean, there's no you know, added, subtracted, and addition and multiplication are all the same numbers. So if you took 17,877.35 cubic yards of mulch, and you went 4 times that, it would give you about 71,000. But if you put it at 5.7 to 1, it comes out to 102,000. And if you do it 6 to 1, it comes out to 107,000 cubic yards of debris that you collected in the city of Danbury. Now, why am I wasting your time with this? Because it's paid at $27.25 a cubic yard on the gross number. And in order for us to know what the gross number is, and I've got all the sheets downstairs, we've got to have a number to work with. There has to be a base number. So with the assistance of the engineering department sending the surveyors down when I needed them to go there to Kennedy, and getting back to it, the long and short of it is, we paid them, instead of 3.8 million, we were just under $3 million. Now, will it stand? I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, Ashford, SIIC are fully aware of it, and I spared no time, as David, if he wants to say, I spared no phone calls and no emails to get to the bottom of what are we really and truly paying for. Is it 107,000, 102,000, or 71,000? And I've gotten all sorts of song and dances. But the fact of the matter is, FEMA came back, the deputy, the person in charge of debris said to me on a phone conversation, I sent it back to him in an email, that they pay 4 to 1 to 5.5 to 1 on debris. And that's it. And that's what I'm going for, because, ladies and gentlemen, when it's all said and done, 3 years from now, the federal auditors are gonna come in knocking on the door, and they're gonna be looking for Paul Estefan, and they're gonna look for Dave St. Hilaire and Dan Garrick, and they're gonna say, we gave you this money, we're here to audit it. And if they find that they overpaid us, trust me, they'll get it out of us. SAIC will be long gone. Ashbrook will be long gone. And we'll be sitting there holding this bag and going, now how do we deal with the loss? Because we can't go back to them to get it, or we could, but good luck. So that's what we're looking at.
We paid Ashburn about $2 million last week, and that's based upon the 4 to 1 ratio, reduction ratio that I was talking about. You know, there's, you know, the amount that Paul is talking about is if it was in total of what Ashburn and SAIC, you know, if we were to pay their full bill, it would be about 3.8. We agree right now at about $2 million just for Ashburn. SAIC is another 300,000 change, whatever. But we're going to hold that up a little bit because, you know, we think they should have checked a few things, but we'll end up paying a substantial portion of that too. But we have submitted to the state to get that money. You know, we submitted the whole 3.8 to the state, and the state's going to provide us with a 50% reimbursement at this point, which means about 1.9. So we got, you know, most of that covered at this point. We're still debating about the remainder of the amount, and you know, we feel confident about the contract. However, you know, that's not going to let us off the hook for the whole remainder. It's just going to let us off the hook for a portion of the remainder. But we've got the other leverage. Because they did perform the job. The debate is really on, the crux of our argument is really the reduction ratio.
If the reduction ratio came back at 25,000 cubic yards of mulch, times 4, that was 100,000 cubic yards. That's what I'm basing it on. And the other thing is that FEMA and the state, state, when they went to the president, asked for $40 million of monies, initial monies, so that it could help out the communities. Knowing that the $40 million is sitting there, I went back to the FEMA representative and I spoke to him, and we spent about 2-3 hours this past Friday. I compiled all our bills, gave it to him, and he said he's gonna submit them to the state and to his superiors, so that we're not sitting waiting 6 to 8 months for our $2 million. We'll hope to get it sometime in the month of May or June, so that it gets back to wherever David feels it needs to be put into the system. Whether it's a reserve account or what, but that's his show. My job is to get as much money back as quickly as possible, so that we don't get into a financial headache. That's what I've been working on.
Thank you.
Any questions?
So just to be clear, they invoiced you on pickup volume and you countered with mulch volume pretty much,
That's
right?
right.
That must have been a fun conversation.
Oh, it was, because first I went to SAIC.
You're so peachy on the phone too.
I went to SAIC, who's our monitoring company, and who certifies to the amount. And I said, what number did you use, 4, 5, or 6 to 1 on the mulch? And they came back and they said, instead of saying to me, we reviewed the contract and it was a 4 to 1 breakdown, they didn't do that. What they came back to me in an email was, we think that you got a good deal from Ashford at 6 to 1. And then I said, no way. And when I looked at those numbers, I said, no way. And then I started digging even further. I went to DEP, who has the contract. It's their contract that we're not piggybacking, but have an agreement to, or allowed to use by law. And they say, what are you trying to accomplish here? Excuse me? I'm trying to make sure that we don't get stung in an audit. I said, that's what I'm trying to accomplish, and I don't want to give money back. And I don't want to pay somebody money they should have never received. Hello? I said, we're not talking $50,000 here. Maybe you can afford to give away money, but we can't. And I kept going up the line until I ended up with FEMA. And I told the guy from Ashford, Ralph, I said, Ralph, let me explain something to you. I didn't go shopping for an answer. I went shopping for the correct information, so that when I report to my mayor, my city council at 21, my finance director, and the citizens of the city of Danbury, that I am confident I can sleep at night recommending that they pay this particular bill. And he was told up front, point blank, I am not going higher than 4 to 1 based on a mulch count.
So they've got some more to prove to us before we make any more payments to them. You know, that's the bottom line. You know, obviously, Paul's been up to his neck in mulch, but.
More ways than
you know,
one.
And,
I got the brush master and the mulch master.
so, you know, there's, we're gonna hold back until we see enough supporting documentation to make additional payments, and that's what it comes down to.
I basically said to them, prove that I am not correct. Show it to me. They haven't done that yet, but I've been waiting. So, that's all I got.
Thank you, Paul.
Any
Thanks.
more questions? Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna go back and start finishing from the top down. We'll do building inspector, page 169.
169. All right, the amended budget at is about 639. The proposed by mayor is about 658. Most of that is due to contractual increases. There's a small increase in the outside services, which is really for their buildings. They haven't had any money in there for if they ever had to close up a building. And so Leo asked if he could have a little more money in there if they needed to board up the building. And they've been incredibly tight with their budgets. They manage it very well. So there's really no room in their existing budget to accommodate that. So I had to create an additional line and put some money in there. And that's why you see that $5,000 in there. That's about it. There's nothing else in there. No fat in this budget, really.
Any questions?
Yeah, you mean a vacant house situation?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. That's all I got.
I don't see anything with any of this. Vehicles. We don't, that goes through the city, that don't go through this piece?
That's what you see over in Antonio's area.
Gotcha.
You know,
Okay.
it's, you've got the fire department takes care of their own situation, the vehicles and everything else. You know, and the motor fuel, same with the police, although the maintenance of those vehicles, the police are over in equipment maintenance. All the other city vehicles are in equipment maintenance.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to Department of Consumer Protection, page 174.
Okay, just a modest increase, just related to contractual increases, and that's it. All the other lines are essentially the same.
Questions on that? Okay, moving on, Elderly Services, page 210.
Elderly services, just a little shuffling, but in the end, same dollar amount, being amended to the proposed. Most of the lines are exactly the same, did some shuffling within their, they took on the contractual increases, but we were able to adjust that from the part-time salaries.
Any questions?
So we're flat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, exactly flat.
But they were able to
Okay.
take on the contractual increases, through the reduction of part-time salaries.
Any questions? All right, moving on, Elderly Transportation, page 212.
That's easy, that's, again, flat, no change.
Just a quick question on that type of service, if I could.
Yeah.
With the store closing down on the end of Main Street,
That's,
there's, in the bus,
we
Change
did that
what?
in the HART program.
so that's all through Hart, that's
Yeah,
not through this?
I spoke to the folks at HART, and even though HART is flat, we kind of reallocated how the program works. Last year was flat as well, so it's been flat for a few years. And really what we've done is, the use of the trolley service has kind of been falling off quite a bit. So we take a couple hours off at the beginning of the day, a couple hours off at the end of the day, maybe we reduce the days of the week that it's not used very much. And we've been able to reallocate that resource to accommodate, if we need to have a run over at the old AP, we're able to do that now. So, that's how we've been able to keep the dollar flat. They would come in a little bit higher, then we have a conversation, what can we do to keep it flat, or to reallocate resources to where it's better used? And they've been very accommodating, very good about it.
Andrew?
David, so in this case, would it be to offset probably the fuel costs that they're expecting? We just kind of shifted the hours around, make
The
it more efficient.
12,000, that's
Yeah.
separate from HART. HART is
That's-
actually a
that's their-
$733,000
I mean, that's their
number.
thing.
Yeah,
that's-
totally separate. This is
we don't
specifically
even-
for the seniors.
That's,
Yeah.
we don't even care, it's just our
Yeah.
individual.
Any other questions? All right, moving on, we'll go to, I guess, Community Services.
Yep, 250?
Community services?
Yeah, it's just,
213 to.
Downtown council.
downtown council.
We'll start with 215. The same for all the community services, it's a 5% drop across the board. Downtown council saw a reduction from 3350 for the current year down to 31,398. And I'll just kind of go through the next one, and then I'll answer your questions. United Way, reduction from 417, 150, down to 396, 393, or 293. And the volunteer center saw a 5% reduction from 6,075 down to 5,771. Now, keep in mind overall that the community services, for the most part, have seen basically a 35% reduction over the last 4 years, 5 years. But that has driven a lot of unions across the city, different agencies coming together to work more effectively. And, certainly you've seen a lot of benefit from using United Way. That whole process is quite a great process to see, the way they go through the vetting process. They utilize the volunteers to go through all the applications, and ultimately the way it's allocated, and they track how many people it's servicing throughout the community. It's exactly what the council had requested a few years ago to see the results of your allocation. Over the course of the last few years, the reduction, we've had a strategic reduction in just arbitrarily allocating throughout dozens of agencies to reducing it to a relatively a few amount. And so those dollars are being better utilized. And we saw over the last 4 budget years about a reduction of about $3/4 million.
Have you had any feedback from United Way? Are they pleased with the amount? Are they not happy with the amount?
They accommodate whatever amount we give them, because they know what kind of economic environment we're in. And they will, proportionately, we make that determination, what proportion is gonna go to economics, education, or health. They kind of give us a pulse of the community, how much should be going here or there based upon what they've seen. And I think we kind of take their guidance on that. However, they'll also let us know certain agencies may need this, now because they didn't get anything for the last couple of years, so maybe, and they put a good proposal together. It's a pretty in-depth vetting process. By the way, we go through something similar with our CDBG monies. For those of you who have had that opportunity to sit through that, we use an external source to help us vet through that process. It's quite a extensive process because we're dealing with federal funds, so they must comply with our requirements, federal requirements.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could just make just a brief statement, those of us that served for years on the grant agency committee, suffered through some very painful, agonizing meetings over who do we decide to give the money to and who do we not decide to give the money to. And ultimately, some of the things that came out of those committees were the goals to reach some independence for some of these groups, some merging for some of these groups, and the United Way plan has managed to do that. And the upside to that with the United Way is it's also offered these agencies the ability to apply for monies elsewhere. And that was one of the goals, one of the main objectives of the committee at the time, was to see if we could wean these agencies off of the taxpayers and put them back on roles such as other avenues of funding through the United Way. So it's worked out, I think, very well for both us, taxpayers, and for the agencies as well. And I've heard nothing but really positive feedback from almost every agency that's talked to me about the outcome of it. So we're very happy about that.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
It also offers an opportunity for a central source, that an agency can go to find out what other agencies are doing. Maybe they may come, the feedback that they may get from their experience in applying for a grant, maybe there's another agencies that's doing something. Maybe you ought to talk to them about what you're doing, and that's how some of these partnerships have come about. So it's really an educational process for them, and because oftentimes they may be reluctant in recognizing that we have to merge or we have to do something different than what we've been doing in the past, because that's just what the economy is driving us to do, and there's no sense in duplicating something that another agency is doing. And if both agencies are kind of not that strong separately, maybe together they can be a much stronger agency alone, you know, as one agency. And that's kind of what the intent was. And we've seen that in several situations, and I think it's been an incredibly successful program. And you're getting a great bang for the buck, so.
I agree. Open for motion? Mr. Knapp?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend the adoption of the Public Safety, Health and Human Services, and Social Services portion of the mayor's budget, subject to public hearing.
Second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Open for dismissal?
So moved.
All those in favor?
You just gave me
Teacher days.
David, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Class